Okay, so now after the introduction to the two mermaid story, I'll continue with describing what the first Zionist Jews that arrived to Venus by the end of the 19th century or the beginning of the 20th century, what they've seen. Again, they've seen it in villages, which means in probably the most advanced places in Venus, because they don't all live in villages, and even among villages, I mean, not everybody possesses the same technology and logistical capabilities that are described in that are part of this, I mean, that predicates this ritual. So these were probably the top, culturally, the top most advanced places in Venus, probably. And this somehow, I mean, coincides, I mean, with the assumption that these places were also, I mean, had good weather, relatively good weather, relatively comfortable weather conditions. And again, I would say the initial interpretation of the watchers, of the people, the Ottoman, Jews, was that this is a part of like peculiar religion, but later they understood, I mean, the functional aspect, and actually they imitated it, and they still imitate it to this day, actually. So, this ritual happens like in villages that are near the shore, which is pretty much pretty normal, and that are very, I mean, and they are very good at fishing. Like they have very highly advanced fishing technology. You should understand that, I mean, if you don't know that, I mean, there are many types of fishing. Like, I mean, fishing is not, I mean, there are many ways to fish, and like all sorts of fishes, of different fish, and like, and I mean, you for different fish, you need different kind of technologies. And most Venusians, when they eat fish, they eat small fish. They don't eat large fish. They eat just small fish, like things like sardines, that they get either from rivers or from shallow waters. Advanced fishing is something that is not common, but it's still easier than in Earth, actually, because the oceans are shallow. In Earth, it's actually more difficult than that, than what is in Venus. So it's part of what you do. So this belongs to villages that are near the shore, which is common, and that they rely on fish for their living, like for the livelihood, which is also common. But they have like relatively advanced. They possess relatively advanced. I would say technology of fishing. But I mean, when we say technology, you need to understand technology and logistic, especially for primitive people, but this is also to any kind of people, they go together. I mean, technology is not necessarily, finding, Koch law or Lorentz law or any kind of like physical, or the Darwin's theory, or I don't know what kind of theory. Technology is many times, I mean, it's like, it's logistical, like it's a way to cooperate between people to get like a result, to achieve a result, like, I mean, in a repeatable way, technology is many times like a procedure that is done by several people together to achieve like a goal, I mean, or in other words, logistics. Now it should be said that in Venus there are no wars like in Earth, because they don't have they don't have advanced politics. I mean, they don't have politea, like, I mean, what I'm going to describe now is probably the most advanced, the most advanced political units that exist in Venus. Most people, I mean, they live in as part of smaller communities than that. So I mean, wars I mean, the most like, I mean, of course the violence. They have notion of violence and they fight each other and they kill each other, of course. But I mean, it's not part of wars because they don't have like the political units. Probably the most complicated political unit is like villages like the ones that I described, and these villages actually are in conflict with each other, and sometimes, I mean, not in the best terms, I would say. Sometimes. And this is probably the closest thing that exists in Venus to what you call war in Earth. This situation of like relatively advanced villages that are in kind of competition. I mean, this is the closest thing to a war that can exist in the planet, because they don't have they don't have political units that are more complicated than that. This is like the top complication of political units that they have. And it's not common, as I said. So these, I mean, Israelis, I mean, it's anachronism to call them Israelis because it was long before, I mean, it was Palestine under Ottoman rule. I mean, so these settlers, they arrived, I mean, on such like a village, and they have seen something which was remarkable. So what they've seen is the following. First, the people of the village, I mean, they chose a volunteer for the ritual. And the volunteer seemed to be a young man or woman, even though, I mean, initially these people, I mean, these settlers, they didn't understand that these presumably primitive people, they have very long lifespan. So it was not actually young. They were actually typically between the age of 100 and 200. They actually, they would never select like young people, but not old. But it was imperative that they will be healthy and not very young, because, I mean, later, I mean, it was understood that this is all related to the tea, that they needed people with a lot of tea in their body, or like a healthy amount of tea in their body. So there were not, actually, young people were not selected, but people between the ages of 100 and 200, something like that, which is not young, but not old. And so, and like, preferably, I mean, the best, I mean, course of action would have been to recruit a volunteer from another village for that purpose. But that not always succeeded. I mean, this was the preferred version of the ritual. I mean, to find a way to recruit a volunteer from a competing village for the ceremony. And if such a volunteer, I mean, could not have been recruited from another village, they had to recruit a volunteer from their own ranks, which was the less favorable course of action. But this sometimes it needed to be done because, I mean, they just couldn't find a volunteer in the competing village. So this person was actually, so it was in a kind of like ritualistic way, it was confined like with like ropes. I mean, ropes that are made of, of like primitive ropes, like, like, I mean, like, from vegetation, like confined to something that looked, that the settlers sort of it as kind of an altar. That's, I mean, one of the reasons why they saw that it's part of a religion, because this somehow, I mean, they thought about it like they weren't too educated, but I mean, it was the first like image that they had like in their mind from Earth was that this is an altar. So they thought this is part of the religion, that what you see is part of a ritual, that and this person is confined to an altar. But anyway, so and then what happened is that in kind of like a ritualistic way, but it was also a very procedural way, in a way that, I mean, hinted, I mean, very strongly that they are used to do it. That it's kind of like, I mean, that it's like a procedure that is known by the people, very quickly, a fishing, a fishing, a fisherman, like a fisher, not man. I mean, it could be a, fi, a fishing expedition was arranged very quickly. And again, this is probably something that was coordinated. I mean, it didn't require much speaking because it was probably something that, I mean, it was, part of ongoing process, like, repeated process. So they arranged among themselves like a group of people that, I mean, that took a boat and went to go fishing. Now, the purpose of this fishing was to catch a large fish. A fish that is above the size of a human, like a grown person. Something like a big tuna. Now, such fish exist in Venus, but only in the deep ocean. Even though it's not as deep as in Earth. It's not like in Earth. It's not so deep. What you call it? The comparable, notion of deep sea is not as deep as it is in Earth. Because if it were, it was impossible for them to do so. I mean, fishing, for big tuna is something that it's not something that villagers, in Paleolithic societies can do. It's very complicated. Just to say, the Inuit famously they knew eventually they discovered, like the Eskimo, the Inuit. They discovered how to hunt whales, but this actually happened very late in their history, like only a little bit before their contact with the Europeans. So when the first Europeans actually met with the Inuit already possessed the technology of hunting whales, but it was a new thing for them, and it's not true to all the Inuits. It's only true to specific villages of the Inuits. Like I don't know if most Inuits, I think, never actually knew how to hunt whales before European contact. But some did, but it was new to them as well, relatively new. Because it required a lot. Just to say that, hunting big fish is not easy. It's not easy at all. And even in Earth, the Inuits were known to be very, strong, and among the strongest humans that ever existed were the Inuits. And they had skulls that you cannot break with a hammer. They had the highest bone density that all humanoids. And it wasn't. They didn't know. But in order to catch very big fish or whales, you need technology. It's not enough to be brave and strong and to have the body, you need tech, and they didn't have it until very late in their history. Eventually, they actually invented it. Without Europeans. Eventually, they actually invented it. Some of them actually discovered, how to do it. Most Inuit, they survived, on very small fish, not big ones. So let's get back to Venus. So very quickly, a fishing, expedition was, arranged with the purpose of catching a big fish, which is something that it was not part of their regular diet. Mostly, the regular thing of the diet was to eat a small fish, not a big fish. To eat small fish that were relatively easily could be catched, in rivers or in shallow waters. The catching of something like a big tuna, which is comparable in the size of human, was something difficult. And it required, again, logistical, capabilities and some kind of technology that not everybody had, actually, in Venus. So this fishing, expedition, went to the sea, to search for this kind of a tuna. Of course, it wasn't really a tuna. It's something from... So what actually, and it's not necessarily one type. I have no idea how they call their fish, but there were several types of very big fish, comparable in size to that, not like whales, not like orca or I don't know baleen, but big, big, comparable to that of a human, in size. and they went to catch it. I mean, and the other people in the villages that just waited. I mean, for several good hours. I mean, for this to actually. Now sometimes they came back in empty hands. I mean, it wasn't like necessary that they will actually catch the fish. And if they didn't, if they came back with empty hands, the candidate, I mean, the volunteer was just, I mean, released, and everybody just went home, and that's what it, I mean, the ceremony ended. But I mean, sometimes they did actually manage to catch the fish. Now, part of the problem is the fish could, it was required that the fish would be alive until the ceremony started. And this actually adds another layer of complexity to the fishing expedition that does not, like, in our time when people, like, I mean, they fish for tuna or others, like big fish, they immediately kill them and freeze them. To the best of my knowledge, maybe I'm wrong, but to the best of my knowledge, that's how it's done in Earth today. Maybe in the past it was different, but I mean, other fish, it's a smaller, I mean, people don't freeze them. They just put it, like, they keep it alive, I mean, in the ship. It's a very common way to fish, like, for in Earth, and it's, but in big fish, it's kind of like, it's a little problem. I mean, it's problem both ways. Okay, if you want to keep it alive, I mean, so you need, like, to have, like, to you need to fight it all the way back, like, because you need to fight, you need to constrain it in the boat, like, and to keep it covered with water. But I mean, I don't really have another option, and I mean, it's not entirely correct. It should be said that, just say, it might be obvious to some people, but maybe it's worth mentioning. The people in Venus, of course, they don't have any kind of refrigeration. But they are not, I mean, primitive people, I'm sorry to use the word primitive, which is in itself, like, it's kind of like, it's non-academic, like, I mean, to say primitive. But I just say it because you know what I mean. But I mean, like, I mean, like, the word is kind of like, I mean, is considered derogatory, but I mean, I just use it because it's very simple, like, everybody inside. So people of, that belongs to kind of like, I mean, to cultures of the Earth that are, I mean, from the past, they were far less concerned. I mean, they didn't have refrigeration, and this limited their dietary options, but they weren't that, I mean, rigid or pious with regards to how, like, fresh their meat, and this is also true to fish, should be. Which means that, I mean, in other words, I mean, people in the past in the Earth, and this is also true to Venus, they gladly have eaten, like, fish that, I mean, some people would today say that it's rotten. Now, it should be said that some actually cultures in Earth, especially in the north, again, amongst our friends, the Inuit, they actually, sometimes they rot it, I mean, intentionally, like, it's part of a delicacy, but, I mean, so this is kind of like a culinary thing, like, I mean, to make it rot intentionally, and, like, I mean, to eat it, I mean, specifically only after it's, I mean, not like, I mean, to eat it rotten because, I mean, it was rotten because, I mean, just, I mean, it's a fact, and they don't want to spoil, to throw it because they want to eat it, but, I mean, they did it intentionally, like, I mean, even if they could have eaten it fresh, they sometimes left it to rot as part of, like, a recipe, like, all sorts of recipes. But I mean, not only the Inuit, I mean, famously there is the Roman garum, and so, which is kind of like a source of rotten fish. So yeah, I mean, people eat rotten. I mean, in the past, people have eaten rotten fish, and not totally rotten because, I mean, it was known to be dangerous. But I mean, it's true to Venus as well, for the same reasons. But just to say that, I mean, people today, I mean, they are very careful, like, not to eat anything that is even remotely rotten, like, I mean, specifically fish. But it wasn't always like that in Earth, and it wasn't like that in Venus. And they were far less lenient. I mean, they are more lenient, like, I mean, with regards to what considered rotten. But with regard to the big fish, to this specific, I mean, ritual, it should have been kept alive. And this was not the common way, like, to eat the fish. It was uncommon, and the Israelis, I call it the Israelis, even though, I mean, they were like more, the people of Palestine, of Ottoman Palestine, the Jews settlers, the settlers understood that this is different than usual, because they understood that these people they don't have that aversion to rotten stuff. Refrigeration wasn't a thing in Palestine as well at the time. I mean, they didn't have refrigerators. I mean, they also didn't like, was not that they had version, like, of little bit rotten fish. Like, the Zionists at the time. We speak about the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. So refrigeration was not a thing, not in Earth nor in Venus. But still they understood that, this is peculiar, like this is something of a ritual, because it was imperative that the fish will be kept alive until the actual ceremony starts. And those settlers interpreted as another kind of, a supporting evidence to that this is actually a religion ritual, in which, again, that this is like an altar. Like, you don't put like a dead animal on an altar, of course. Like, only living animals, and many times in perfect condition or in very good condition, should be put on an altar. So again, this looked to them as something also of religion thing. So if they actually caught the fish, sometimes, I don't know, it might look hideous to these settlers, because it wasn't like fish from Earth, but anyway, it was a big fish, and they kept it, and then they confided to that same altar near the human, and very quickly it died, but only then, and not immediately, because it can survive a little bit without out of the water. So it didn't. When the ceremony started, it was still alive, but out of the water and without much time, like before it's dead. So it was an altar with a human on one side that looks like young and healthy, but actually was not that young, between 100 and 200. It would be both male and female. And on the other side, the very big fish, like something kind of a tuna, that was like now out of water, and chained. Not chained with chains, like with vegetation, like roped to the altar, and it started like to breathe his last. Because it was out of the water, so it started like to die. It wasn't long before it will die, and then was interpreted as a ceremony started. Now, what was the ceremony? So the Israelis didn't really understand what they actually watched, but everybody from the village was there, like surrounding the altar, and for several hours, it took several hours, all of them looked at the altar, and also sometimes at the sky, but then again at the altar, and they've said also of, they did things that was interpreted. It's a question what they actually did, but it was interpreted by the viewers as kind of like a prayer or a chanting, like something again from the world of religion. That's the way that it was interpreted by these settlers, the Zionist settlers. That this is kind of like a religious chanting, like not necessarily intelligible words. But I myself, I'm not certain that this is like a correct interpretation of what actually happened, because it's too culturally biased towards things that are known from Earth, and the interpretation of what actually happened might be more complicated. And there is what you could know האינטרפרטציה האתית והאמית. I mean, it's like, like the inner interpretation or the outside interpretation, like how the people themselves interpret what they do and how, an outsider would interpret it. But let's leave it aside. Just we'll say that, let's describe what happened, because something actually happened during those hours. It wasn't like just people praying. This is actually, what the people of the village have done. But what actually happened is something incredible from the eyes of the Israelis, that, the settlers that were not used to this. It was new to them initially. So what actually happened was amazing. What actually happened is that they started to transform both the human and the fish. They changed their appearance. Now, it didn't take a second, it took several hours. And along the process, both died. Like, it didn't take much. During most of the ceremony, during most of these hours, it was actually dead bodies. But it was, imperative that they will start. It cannot be started on dead bodies. Like, the process required that, at the beginning of the ceremony, both, like, creatures would be alive, like the human and the fish. But they at some point they died, and probably most of the time it was just bodies. And it was impossible, like, the ceremony will be ended with them alive. Was out of the question. And they began to look like each other. The human slowly gained the physical characteristics of the fish, and the fish slowly gained the physical characteristics of a human. And after several hours, of course, it was just dead bodies, but they looked very, very similar. And both sides was actually something like a mermaid. A hideous one, of course, but something like a mermaid in both sides. Now, I should say at that point that some of these settlers, like the Palestinian settlers, like the Jewish settlers, thought that the purpose of the ritual was to create a mermaid, like a living mermaid or two mermaids, and that it always failed because they didn't know how to do it. So, it always ended in failure. But, very quickly they understood that this is not true. That actually, the mermaidization, like, the transformation to two mermaids was maybe, the most visually stunning aspect of the ceremony, but this is actually a byproduct of the ceremony. It's actually a secondary issue, secondary thing that happens. And it was nobody really ever tried to create, it wasn't the point at all to try to create a mermaid. And also not to keep them alive. It was known, it was obvious that, that they will die. There was no other outcome, and no other outcome was required. But what always happened is that, you had two bodies that looks like mermaids, one next to each other. Now, what happened then is that the people of the village took the body of now it was looked like a mermaid, but it was initially the human. They took the human and they buried him or her. It should be said that they have ceremonial burial in Venus. Probably not everywhere, but then again, we discuss advanced villages, like that they have high culture, relatively, very high culture relative to Venus. So, and these people have ceremonial burial, like they bury their people. And also I should say that they have tombstones that look, sometimes like that of the tomb of Absalom from Nachal Kidron, like in Jerusalem. This is like a good, if you know, there are several, like, there's the Kever Bnei Chazir and Yad Avshalom, and so, like the tomb of Absalom from Nachal Kidron is actually good, like a representation of, like, of like a high statue, tomb from Venus. So, so they buried him, like, as required. Then they took the second mermaid, that was previously a fish, and they put it on a bonfire. Now it should be said at that point that one of the misconceptions that people have regarding in Israel regarding Venus is that they don't know how to make fire, and I don't know why they think that. I mean, it was always a mystery to me, and I discussed this mystery in the past, like several times in this channel. That I don't understand why people like why everybody in Israel, like in the Shabbat, they think that Venusians can't make fire. I mean, maybe it's true to most of them, but I mean, not to all of them. Certainly not. Like I mean, like these people, like in the top, like and the Israelis knew them like since 100 years ago. They knew these people, more than 100 years ago. 120 years ago, they already knew that these people knew how to make. Certainly, they. So I mean, it's definitely not true that categorically that all Venusians can't make fire. This is not. It's absolutely not true. And Israelis knew that it's not true. I mean, it's not a new thing that it's not true. But at some point, it was kind of like Israeli mythologies regarding Venusians that they can't make fire. But I mean, and now people believe it, but it's not correct. It's just incorrect. I don't know why. I just don't know why they think they're on those lines. I mean, sometimes I mean, you know, some stupid people just, I mean, they invent something, and other people just, I mean, repeat the same mistake again and again, even though it was known to be mistake, not true even by the Israelis themselves. So yes, at least, I mean, again, it might not be characteristics of everybody in Venus. It's a planet, and yes, we discuss now the people of probably the top echelon like of a culture. This is like the top culture of Venus. Okay, it's whatever it is described here requires both technology and logistics and cooperation and, I would say, cultural level that is probably the top of what you can find in Venus. Okay? It's not something that you can find everywhere. But yes, these people, I mean, the people from these like places, they certainly knew about fire, yes. And they certainly cooked their fish. I mean, either like, you know, in water, like cooked like, you know, in like soup, or like the way that the Inuit do it, or it's funny. I mean, when Stephenson, he was a very famous scholar of the North, like, and of the Inuits. Like, I mean, so when we went to live with them, but they already, I mean, these people already, like, they had some kind of notion of Europeans. It wasn't the first Europeans. So so he describes how initially they prepared, like, I mean, they wanted like to honor him, like, so they took like a salmon and they put it like on the fire, like in like a barbecue salmon, because they knew because it was already known back then, it was more than 100 years ago, that's what European likes, like they like salmon like on the grill. And actually, it's still true because they still like it. It's funny because they still like it. But actually, then themselves, they don't like it at all. They actually ate all their fish like cooked in water. But I mean, but Stephenson wanted to be like them. Like he wanted to, but they were right. I mean, that was actually, he found it more tasty, like the grilled salmon. But he wanted like to live with them like for a long time. That was the plan, and that was he have done so. I mean, intentionally asked them like that he should eat like what they eat. So I mean, they bought him like, you know, just I mean, like what everybody ate, which is like a soup with a fish, like it cooked in the water inside, a trout or something like that. And yes, initially it didn't like, I mean, and with almost no salt at all. I mean, because they didn't have salt. I mean, and initially it was difficult for him to eat it because it was no salt at all, and of course no spices at all, and cooked in water. But after some time he understood, like kind of like he describes how he understood that this is actually the best way to eat the fish, and this is like, and since then it was his favorite way, like, and he kind of like ditched, you know, the grilled salmon with spices and salt, and I mean, he understood why it's actually, you know, הייתה לו הערה מה הדרך הנכונה לאכול את הדג. As yes, I mean, it's a funny description from his memoirs. So I mean, so yes, I mean, so in Venus as well, some eat it like, I mean, you know, like, you know, the Inuit style, which is like in water, cooked in water, and some eat it like, you know, in the European style, which is in grill. Anyway, they use fire. They don't eat it raw. I don't know why so many of the Israelis think that, I mean, they categorically all Venusians can't make fire. It's absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. It was known to be untrue. I have no explanation for this false belief. Anyway, so they cook the fish, like, I mean, they grill the fish. It's a big one, so I mean, it wasn't like, it's not something that you can just, I mean, put like on, like, small fishes, you know, you can make a soup out of it, like, you know, in the pot. But that one was put, like, you know, on a big fire, like in grill. And when it was roasted, I mean, they cut, like, everybody in the village received like a small portion, and everybody ate. And sometimes there was actually even like extra, like, I mean, that even if everybody received a little part, there still was like there was still, I mean, leftovers. So they actually like prepared like gifts for other people from other villages. Like they even like they even had enough to give to give like a small portion, several, like, you know, like meals, like, or, you know, wrapped portions to people from other villages. So yes, after some time, the Israelis actually also offered, and I said the Israelis, but this is anachronism. They were not Israelis. The Palestinians, the Jews from Ottoman Palestine, I mean, offered like a little bit, and they felt that, I mean, they must accept it, I mean, you know, because they wanted to be polite. So, I mean, they had no other choice, presumably. So they accepted it. Now, very quickly, these people, the settlers, understood what's actually happening, because this was actually a functional thing. This is not, it's not ceremonial. I mean, again, it's debatable whether it's a religion or not, a religious ceremony, and I would say it's not. I already said why, but I mean, what's definitely true is that there is a function to this behavior. There is a functional reason why they do it, and those settlers very quickly understood the function, and actually, and also they've eaten like you know, a small part of the fish mermaid, and actually they imitated it, and they still, and this is true to this day in the land of in modern Israel, but with some variation. I would just say now that, I mean, a modern variation in Israel is that to do everything in Israel besides the fishing trip, because the fish must be taken from Venus, and that's why this is why, I mean, it's so related to the full moon phenomenon that I described in the beginning. That I recall this scene because of the full moon that, I mean, was 2 days ago, because the gates are associated with the moon in Israel, not in Israel, in Earth. I mean, and they are all moon gates, so they are only open during the night, and the more like and they open like in gradual. Everything is related to the neros is gradual, like it's not like on off, it's gradual. So they open in a gradual way and they close in a gradual way. And if the moon is like if it's a full moon, like in the middle of the months, like the Hebrew months, they open the most quickly. So you have the most time, like in one like trip, to go and get back. So if you want to go and and immediately get back, which is essential in this kind of thing, because you want the fish to be alive, it's actually very difficult. It's not easy at all, like, but to do it. Like, you need to be very organized, like in to be, it's like a commando mission, like, you need to. So I mean, the most time you have to do it is actually if there is a full moon, because then, I mean, it opens like the most quickly. So you have the most time, like, I mean, to just, I mean, organize in Israel, get to Venus, I mean, acquire a boat, go to the ocean, I mean, fish for this tuna, take it alive, bring it alive to Israel. Not an easy thing at all, but it has been done several times. It's not impossible. It's not easy, and it doesn't always end with success. Like sometimes it's impossible. I mean, they don't manage to do it. They didn't manage to do it, but yes, I mean, a modern variation of the whole thing is to do everything in Israel besides getting the fish, and this requires a lot of, like, I mean, proficiency and determination from the fishing, like, expedition, like, expedition that is arranged in Israel, but then they should do it all very, very quickly and very efficiently. And of course, it must not be their first time in Venus. I mean, they should be well aware of, like, what's going on, like, so they will not be, לא שוקיסטים, כאילו צריכים להיות כאלה שכבר, like, I mean, פזמניקים. אז, so, but what actually happens here? So what actually happens is the following. There are several ways to transfer tea between people. Now, this can be done both by transfer of fluids. This is like the way that is done mostly between males and females. And also it can be done sometimes remotely by passing the gates, like the portals, through the portals. But it necessitates that there will be some kind of transfer of fluid previous to that. That, I mean, there will already be fluids, like in both people. I mean, that the tea will also, I mean, the transfer tea will exist in both people, and it will be an open, like a open state, and you can actually control it, like to be open or closed, and then they can sometimes transfer between them even remotely, because the tea is portal. The tea is robots. I mean, what I call the Neros. What you call the tea is what I call, again, there is what I call the red Neros, which is the red variation of the robots, like the nanobots, microbots. It comes in all sorts of sizes. And the red ones are typical to the female body, and what I call the brown ones are typical to the male body, and I have the yellow ones that are of another species because I'm not Venusian. Now, it should be said, at some point, it was understood by Venusians, and also by the settlers, by the Jewish settlers, but certainly by Venusians, that there is actually a way, to get huge amounts of tea very shortly. And this is by eating the actual person. Now, it should be said that people are not the only creature that have tea in their body in this planet. Many other life forms have tea in their body. I don't know if all life forms or just many. This is an open question. I really don't know. I don't know, and it's difficult. And now I've created Venusian life forms in this place, in this laboratory, right here. Like, I mean, and the big ones. I mean, the big life forms are they. I mean, it's not a science talk. So just say I don't know if all life forms in Venus have the tea in their body. I just don't know, and it's a difficult question because probably, I mean, because the tea itself, I mean, the robots, they exist in tremendous amount, like, I mean, variety of sizes. And this was demonstrated a lot in this channel. I mean, that, like, even just using my simple, backlight microscope, Bresser microscope, Bresser 1 microscope, I mean, you can watch the robots, like, I mean, in 64 magnification when they are bigger than, I mean, the whole frame of the microscope. But even if you do, like, 1000 magnification, which is possible if you pull, like, the lens, like, if you pull the tube lens, you can go with even more than 1000, and you still see tremendous amount of these robots, like, in the very small microscopic scale. So they have a tremendous amount of sizes. So it's possible that all life forms have the tea in their body in this planet, but some in very small. I don't know. It's an open question. Anyway, it was known that if you eat like a life form that contains the tea in their body, it's like a way to get a huge boost of the tea. Now, the life form that contains the most tea by far, is humans, like in Venus. By far. Like, I mean, by tremendous margin. And The people that are between, like, that are, I mean, yeah, very young people don't have it, like, very much of it, but after, like, when the person, if the person is healthy and more than 100 years old, they probably have a tremendous amount of it in their body. Tremendous amount of it in their body. But there is a problem. There is a problem. These Venusians, there's actually more than one problem. There's something that is very important that you should know about the robots. And this is actually something that was somewhat, I wouldn't say proven, but there is, what I'm going to say now, it's got a supported evidence, actually like empirical evidence in this channel. Like in the, you hear the zombies all over the place. They still have what to say. עוד לא פסקה, ולא פסיק פומי מגירסי. תמיד יש להם מה לומר, איזה חידש בהלכה, איזה חידש באגדתה יש להם, לזומבים. So, this is actually supported by some microscopic evidence from this channel, from like this YouTube channel. And it's the Neros, the small robots, when they are cooked, they have no problem with high temperature. And this was seen in the many crucible, experiments. Many crucible experiments. It's actually a way to energize them with heat, with fire, with even strong fire. But when they are cooked with, like schnitzel or, like pieces of ground meat, like when I place it in the crucible, I don't eat like these things now. But in the last couple of years, but we still get it like in the hostel, like from charity. So when I cooked it with when I placed inside the crucible like pieces of schnitzel, like a chicken, schnitzel, or pieces pieces of from like ground ground meat. And you put it in the crucible and it's cooked with them, with the Neros, they disappear. Like they either die and disappear or they disappear. I don't know where, but they are not there. They are not there. Now it should always be so you cannot cook like meat or chicken with the Neros because they will just disappear. Now this is to some extent true to digestion as well, but to not to the same amount, not to the same extent, but to some extent this is actually due to the digestion process, which means that if you eat meat or chicken, your body loses, and if your body contains the tea, your body loses some of the tea. Now historically, this was the reason why Homo sapiens don't have tea in their body, because initially they actually did have it in their body. That's why they are so, when they eat it, and so many of them, consume it in Israel, in other places, it's like, it immediately it's like it was made for them. Like it's immediately affect them like in beneficial ways, and they enjoy it very much. So you can ask, how is it possible? It's like an alien drug, like, presumably. So like, how is it possible that, the alien drug would be so, fit, like, would be fit presumably for, especially the Homo sapiens body, and without like needing to even like to adjust for it, and so it's kind of like a magic. So the answer is that it's not magic. It's just that this substance was in the past natural to the human body as well. So yes, but it doesn't mean that you can eat it without repercussions. Just to say humans should not eat it. But this is another topic and discuss in other videos. Let's try to focus like on the issue at hand. Just to say that even the digestion process is kind of like it's kind of like a crucible that makes like if you digest meat or chicken, some of the Neros in your body are dying, and along many generations, that was the reason why the humans gradually lost their Neros and what I call the Neros and what you call the T, and accompanied with that was a gradual decrease in lifespan, in a process that is actually not dissimilar or not that different than what is described in the book of Genesis, and also in many other mythologies of humans. It's actually not only described in Genesis, it has other, echoes in many mythologies, like the decrease in lifespan. So this happened because of the gradual decrease of the T. That is a consequence of humans eating poultry and meat, and more so because they cook it. Because if you cook it, it's even like worse, like from the neurons just fade away. And this again, this was, you can see there are actual evidence for that that are microscopic evidence in this channel for that. But even if you choose to eat the animal, now in Venus they don't eat meat and poultry. I actually to this day I don't know why. It's still an open question, because they do have some kind of like birds in there. And regarding like four-legged animals, I know that they have something like that. I have very little information. I just don't know. I just don't know. What I do know is that they don't eat it. Maybe they can't. Maybe they don't know how to hunt. Maybe they don't know how to hunt these animals. I don't know. Maybe they only know how to hunt fish and they are satisfied with that. I don't know. Maybe it's indeed part of the religion, and they do have a religion. I didn't say that they didn't have. I just said I don't know. I don't have any information. It's all these are very good questions, and if anyone have an answer to this question, I'll gladly receive any knowledge or like any information. But I don't know. But maybe they have religion. Maybe I don't know. I know that just the fact that they prefer. They eat fish and whatever thing they can gather from the land. But if they cooked like a person, they cooked a person like a volunteer, then all the neurons would be faded out of it. Now, if they killed the person and like eaten and get the person raw, first of all, they are strongly against it. This is not nice. From their point of view, like to eat a person that is raw, without cooking it. It's not something that is usually done in Venus by any kind of village or people. And also it should be said that even if they would have done that and they are not inclined to do such things, still they would have lost many of the neurons in the digestion process. So it's a problem, just to eat a human. Either cooked or not. But what actually is the purpose of this ceremony that initially the settlers did not actually understand, but with time when they understood when they understood about the land, but the existence of the substance that is now you call the tea, and they started to eat it themselves. What they understood is that what the purpose of this ceremony is not the creation of two mermaids. This is a byproduct of the ceremony. The purpose of the ceremony is to transfer all the neurons from the body of the human to the body of the fish. This is the purpose of the ceremony. And the actual shape-shifting that is done is not something that is required, it's just something that it's a secondary kind of process that happens, but it's not the main process at least from the point of view of the initiators of the process. What they actually want is that all the neurons, or at least as much as possible of the neurons, the robots, the T, from the body of the volunteer will be transferred to the fish. And then they roast the fish, but the neurons do not die. So, and then what every person actually gets, this small portion of the mermaid, of the roasted mermaid, is actually a piece of like a meal that is very, very, very rich in tea, like much more than you can get in any other way. So this is actually a way for every person in the village, and sometimes they even have enough leftovers to give gifts to other people from other villages, to get like a huge like boost on the tea in their body, like a tremendous one that they cannot get any other way, even remotely so. So that's why they do it, and then they eat it, and they all get the tea. so let's stop here, and I'll continue with another video with discussion and like my own analysis of this ritual and its implications. Also, maybe a little bit, I'll speak a little bit about the Israeli variation of this ritual. I would just say right now that, I mean, obviously, I mean, it's expected like to get, like, I mean, that this description would, I mean, would ignite with a variety of, I mean, emotional responses from the audience, and I understand it. I mean that, I mean, it's I mean, it's by nature it's controversial by nature. I mean, and you need to be very open-minded, like, I mean, and to understand that this is a cultural thing, and like, I mean, and not to be too harshly, too hastily judgmental towards it. I mean, without kind of like weighting all the cultural, I mean, you know, background and the cultural implications of the ceremony, because it's obviously belongs to the realm of things that are cultural, that are culturally relativistic. I mean, and cannot be judged like by the same parameters by people that belongs to every different culture that can possibly exist. So with this kind of, I mean, hesitation in mind, or I would say postponing of judgment in mind, let's, I mean, very quickly, I mean, I start by uploading this video. It's almost an hour now, and with this kind of notion of maybe postponing of judgment and open-mindedness, we will try to analyze this cultural artifact in the broad sense in the next video.